You know that feeling when you're scrolling through gear options for a weekend birdwatching trip, and the price tags start looking more like a gamble than a purchase? I've been there trying to decide whether to splurge on a high-end spotting scope or stick with a cheaper binocular that just won't give you the detail you need when the light drops. That hesitation is real, especially because a spotting scope like the Swarovski STR80 isn't something you toss on a shelf and forget. It's a tool you bring out when you want that crisp, close-up view of a distant raptor or a distant mountain ridge, and if you pick the wrong one, you end up with a heavy case, a blurry image, or an eyepiece that never quite fits your workflow. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the STR80 belongs to that sweet spot of serious but still portable within the spotting scope world. Its 80mm objective lens is big enough to gather a lot of light, which means you can actually use it in lower light conditions, think dawn field trips or dusk wildlife observation, without the image turning into a washed-out mess. That size also translates into a relatively wide field of view when you pair it with the right eyepiece, something you'll notice the moment you line it up with a far-off flock of geese. The scope itself isn't a standalone unit, you need an eyepiece, and Swarovski offers a 2060 zoom that slots right in. The combination feels like a modular system. You can keep the main tube light enough for backpacking, then swap the eyepiece for a higher power if you're setting up a static observation point. Now, let's talk about what actually matters when you're out in the field. One of the biggest concerns people have is image clarity. Do you get a true color picture, or is there a ghostly halo around the subject? The STR80 uses extra low dispersion fluoride HD glass, which does a solid job of keeping chromatic aberration at bay. In practice, that means when you're looking at a bright plumaged bird against a dark sky, the colors stay saturated and you don't see that purple fringe that cheap scopes sometimes produce. The SWAROTOP anti-reflection coating further cuts down glare, so even when the sun is low and the light is trying to bounce off the lenses, the view stays contrast-rich. I tested that on a hazy morning, and the silhouette of a distant hawk stayed crisp, not smeared by stray light. Durability is another real-world factor. Spotting scopes travel on rugged terrain, get tossed into rain-slick packs, and occasionally get knocked around by curious kids. Swarovski coats the external lenses with SWARODUR, a scratch-resistant layer that feels like a protective shield. I've seen a couple of comparable scopes get a nick on the front element after a tumble, which instantly degrades image quality. The STR80's coating held up after a day of hiking through pine needles and a quick drop off a low ledge, with no visible scratches. That said, the scope's body is still made of aluminum alloy, which is sturdy but not indestructible. If you're planning to throw it around like a rugged used piece of gear, you might want a dedicated hard case. One practical downside that shows up once you start using the system is the reliance on that separate eyepiece. The scope's tube is well balanced, but if you forget to bring the appropriate eyepiece, the whole thing is essentially a pricey barrel. Some users might expect a plug-and-play experience, but you'll need to plan ahead and keep the eyepiece in a protected pocket. Also, the 2060 zoom range, while flexible, means you have to manually adjust focus and zoom for each new target. That's fine if you're patiently tracking a single bird, but if you're trying to scan a large area quickly, say, during a safari where you want to swing from one animal to the next, the manual process can feel a bit sluggish compared to a scope with a motorized focus system. Who should consider buying the Swarovski STR80? If you're a dedicated birdwatcher, a field biologist, or a hobbyist who enjoys spotting distant wildlife and wants a system that can still be carried in a day pack, this scope fits the bill. Its light-gathering power and high-quality glass make it useful for early morning or late evening sessions when other scopes start to struggle. It also shines for landscape enthusiasts who love to pull a close-up of a mountain face or a distant waterfall without hauling a massive telephoto lens. On the other hand, if you're a casual hiker who only occasionally wants a quick glance at something far away, the extra cost and the need for a dedicated eyepiece might not be justified. For those who prefer a grab-and-go unit that you can point and shoot without fiddling, a high-end binocular or a compact monocular could be a better fit. In terms of value, the STR80's price is anchored by its optical quality and the brand's reputation for precision glass. You're paying for that extra low dispersion material and the SWAROTOP coating, which you can't easily find in lower-priced scopes. The real savings come from